At the heart of this tale are three individuals whose paths would become inextricably intertwined. Alton Rhodes, the 19-year-old young man whose charm would prove both irresistible and destructive. Mandy Corell, a neglected wife yearning for passion, and Delilah Frost, a recent divorcee seeking to reclaim her sense of self. Their story would ultimately lead to a shocking act of violence that would forever change the face of the community, leaving its residents to question how well they truly knew their neighbors. At just 19, Alton Rhodes exuded a confidence and maturity that belied his years. Standing at 6 feet tall, he turned heads wherever he went. But it wasn't just his looks that drew people in. Alton possessed a magnetic personality that made everyone feel special in his presence. Raised by a single mother who worked long hours as a nurse, Alton had learned early on to fend for himself. He developed a knack for reading people, understanding their needs and desires sometimes before they did themselves. This skill served him well in his part-time job as a barista at the local coffee shop, where he quickly became a favorite among the regulars. Alton had moved to Redwood just a month after graduating high school, eager to strike out on his own. His mother had reconnected with an old friend in the area who offered Alton a place to stay while he figured out his next steps. He had vague plans of attending community college, but for now he was content to work and enjoy his newfound freedom. The young man's arrival in the neighborhood didn't go unnoticed. Women of all ages found excuses to visit the coffee shop during his shifts, while men grudgingly admired his easy charm. Alton took it all in stride, flashing his dimpled smile and engaging and friendly banter with everyone who crossed his path. But it was his encounters with his immediate neighbors that would set in motion a chain of events no one could have predicted. On one side of his temporary home lived the Corells, an outwardly perfect couple whose carefully maintained image hid a crumbling marriage. On the other side resided Delilah Frost, a woman in her early 40s, struggling to rebuild her life after a bitter divorce. Alton's first meeting with Mandy Corell occurred on a sunny Saturday morning as he was mowing the lawn. She had come over to welcome him to the neighborhood, bearing a plate of homemade cookies. Their eyes met, and for a moment time seemed to stand still. Little did either of them know that this innocent encounter would be the first step down a dangerous path. Mandy Corell appeared to have it all: a successful husband, a beautiful home, and the envy of her peers. But behind closed doors her life was far from perfect. Married for 15 years to Gregory, a prominent surgeon, Mandy had slowly watched the passion and intimacy drain from their relationship. Mandy had once been vivacious and ambitious, with dreams of becoming a renowned artist. However, as Gregory's career flourished, she found herself relegated to the role of trophy wife, expected to maintain their home and social status while her own aspirations withered. Her paintings, once filled with vibrant colors and raw emotion, now gathered dust in a forgotten corner of their basement. The first time Mandy laid eyes on Alton, she felt a spark she thought had long since died: his youthful energy and genuine interest in her thoughts and feelings awakened something within her. She found herself making excuses to be outside when he was around, carefully selecting her outfits and rediscovering her makeup collection. Their interaction started innocently enough. Mandy would bring over baked goods or offer gardening advice, lingering longer each time to chat. Alton, in turn, seemed genuinely interested in her life and experiences. He asked about her artwork, and his enthusiasm rekindled her passion for painting. One evening, as Gregory was working late yet again, Mandy invited Alton over to see her old paintings. As they stood in the dim light of the basement, surrounded by canvases that told the story of her faded dreams, something shifted between them. Alton's hand brushed against hers, and Mandy felt a jolt of electricity course through her body. She turned to face him, her heart pounding. Alton's eyes searched hers, asking a silent question. In that moment, all the years of neglect and loneliness culminated in a desperate need for connection. Mandy leaned in, and their lips met in a kiss that would change everything. As she pulled away, breathless and conflicted, Mandy knew she was standing on the precipice of a decision that could unravel her entire life. But the fire that Alton had ignited within her was too strong to ignore. For the first time in years, she felt alive, desired and seen. At 42 years old, Delilah Frost was starting over. After 20 years of marriage, she had finally found the courage to leave her emotionally abusive husband. The divorce had been finalized just 3 months before Alton moved in next door, leaving Delilah raw and vulnerable. Once a confident and outgoing woman, years of criticism and manipulation had eroded Delilah's self-esteem. She second-guessed every decision. From her choice of clothing to her career moves, the divorce had drained her financially and emotionally, forcing her to downsize from the lavish home she once shared with her ex-husband to the modest house in Redwood. Delilah's first encounter with Alton came on a rainy afternoon when she was struggling to carry groceries from her car. Without hesitation, he rushed over to help, flashing a warm smile that made her feel seen for the first time in years. As they chatted while putting away her groceries, Delilah found herself opening up about her recent divorce and the challenges of rebuilding her life. To her surprise, Alton listened without judgment, offering words of encouragement and support. His youthful optimism was infectious, and Delilah found herself smiling more than she had in months. Before he left, Alton suggested they have coffee sometime, an invitation that both thrilled and terrified her. In the days that followed, Delilah found herself looking forward to their casual encounters. She began taking evening walks, timing them to coincide with Alton's return from work. They would often stop to chat, and Delilah relished the way Alton made her feel, not as a broken middle-aged divorcee but as a woman with value and appeal. Their friendship deepened quickly. Alton showed genuine interest in Delilah's work as a freelance graphic designer, even offering to help her build a website to attract more clients. His belief in her abilities reignited her passion for her career, and she found herself taking on new projects with renewed confidence. One night, as they sat on Delilah's porch sharing a bottle of wine, the air between them charged with unspoken tension, Alton's hand brushed against hers, and Delilah felt a rush of desire she thought she'd never experienced again. When he leaned in to kiss her, she didn't hesitate. In that moment, all her doubts and insecurities melted away, replaced by a burning need to feel alive and wanted once more. As summer gave way to fall, Alton found himself entangled in 2 passionate affairs, each filling a different void in his life. With Mandy, he experienced a depth of emotion and intellectual connection he had never known before. Their clandestine meetings were filled with intense discussions about art, life and dreams, interspersed with moments of fiery passion. Mandy's neglected talents flourished under Alton's admiration, and she began painting again with renewed vigor. Delilah, on the other hand, offered Alton a sense of nurturing and stability he had always craved. Their time together was marked by comfort and easy laughter, with Delilah's confidence growing stronger with each encounter. Alton found himself playing the role of supportive partner, encouraging her career ambitions and helping her rediscover her self-worth. The young man rationalized his behavior, convincing himself that he was helping both women find happiness and fulfillment. He skillfully juggled his time between them, using his job at the coffee shop and fictitious study groups as covers for his rendezvous. Mandy reveled in the secret thrill of her affair, feeling more alive than she had in years. She threw herself into her art, producing a series of abstract paintings that pulsed with newfound passion and energy. Her renewed zest for life didn't go unnoticed by her husband Gregory, who attributed the change to a new fitness routine. Mandy had ostensibly started. Meanwhile, Delilah blossomed under Alton's attention. Her wardrobe underwent a transformation, reflecting her growing confidence. Friends remarked on the positive change in her demeanor, assuming she had finally moved on from a painful divorce. As weeks turned into months, both women grew increasingly attached to Alton. Mandy began to fantasize about leaving her loveless marriage, imagining a future where she could pursue her art freely with Alton by her side. Delilah, having experienced the pain of a failed marriage, was more cautious but couldn't help dreaming of a fresh start with someone who truly appreciated her. Alton, for his part, became more deeply enmeshed in the web of deceit he had woven. He cared for both women and found himself unable to choose between them. The excitement of his double life began to wear thin, replaced by a constant state of anxiety and guilt. One crisp autumn evening, as Alton lay in Mandy's arms in the secret studio she had set up in her basement, she whispered words that sent a chill down his spine. "I think I'm falling in love with you." Later that same night, in Delilah's warm kitchen, she gazed at him over a cup of tea and confessed that he made her believe in love again. As Alton walked home in the dark, the weight of his actions finally began to sink in. He realized that what had started as harmless flirtation had grown into something far more complex and potentially destructive. Little did he know, the delicate balance he had been maintaining was about to come crashing down, with consequences more dire than he could have ever imagined. As autumn progressed, Alton's double life became increasingly difficult to maintain. The thrill of secret rendezvous was replaced by a constant state of anxiety and hypervigilance. Every text message, every phone call, every casual encounter in the neighborhood became a potential minefield that could expose his deception. Alton developed an elaborate system of alibis and excuses. He cited increased hours at the coffee shop, fictitious study groups for classes he wasn't taking, and non-existent volunteer work to account for his time. His phone became a source of both connection and dread, carefully managed with separate conversations and meticulously deleted message threads. The pressure began to take its toll on Alton, and his once easy smile became strained. Co-workers at the coffee shop noticed his distraction, attributing it to the stress of balancing work and school. In reality, Alton spent every moment terrified that his carefully constructed house of cards would come tumbling down. There were close calls that left Alton's heart racing. One afternoon, he was walking hand in hand with Delilah in a nearby park. When he spotted Mandy in the distance, he quickly steered Delilah in the opposite direction, inventing a sudden craving for ice cream to explain their abrupt change of course. Another time, Alton was helping Mandy carry groceries into her house when Delilah drove by. He ducked behind Mandy's car, pretending to tie his shoe. Praying that Delilah hadn't noticed him, the incident left him shaken, realizing how easily his deception could be exposed. As Mandy and Delilah grew more attached, they began to demand more of Alton's time and attention. Mandy, emboldened by her rediscovered passion for art and life, started to talk about leaving her husband. She painted vivid pictures of a future with Alton, filled with love and creative pursuits. These conversations left Alton simultaneously exhilarated and terrified, unsure of how to respond to such honest declarations. Given their age differences, Delilah, while more cautious about jumping into a serious relationship, began to integrate Alton into her life in subtle ways. She introduced him to her friends as her young neighbor, but the affectionate glances and inside jokes they shared spoke volumes. She started making plans for the holidays, hinting at wanting Alton to meet her family. The women's growing expectations added another layer of complexity to Alton's already precarious situation. He found himself making conflicting promises, agreeing to holiday plans with both women, and knowing he would inevitably disappoint one or both of them. As the pressure mounted, Alton's guilt began to manifest physically. He lost weight. His sleep was plagued by nightmares. And he developed a nervous tic, constantly checking his phone and glancing over his shoulder. He knew he needed to end at least one of the affairs. But the thought of hurting either woman was unbearable. What Alton failed to realize was that his increasingly erratic behavior was not going unnoticed. Both Mandy and Delilah, initially blinded by their feelings for him, were beginning to sense that something was amiss. The stage was set for a confrontation that would shatter the delicate balance Alton had been struggling to maintain. The facade Alton had so carefully constructed came crashing down on a chilly November evening. The annual festival was in full swing, with residents gathering in the town square for food, games, and live music. Alton had agonized over whether to attend, knowing both Mandy and Delilah would be there. In the end, he decided that his absence would be more suspicious than his presence. As Alton navigated through the crowd, he felt like walking on a tightrope. He exchanged pleasant greetings with neighbors, all the while scanning the area for signs of Mandy or Delilah. He had just begun to relax, thinking he might make it through the evening unscathed, when disaster struck. Mandy, who had been volunteering at the face painting booth, spotted Alton and waved him over enthusiastically. As he reluctantly approached, he saw Delilah at a nearby table, arranging items for the silent auction. Time seemed to slow down, as Alton watched the two women, oblivious to each other's significance, moving towards an inevitable collision. Mandy reached Alton first, greeting him with a warm hug that lingered a bit too long for mere neighbors. As she pulled away, her eyes shining with affection, Delilah appeared at Alton's side. The younger man felt the blood drain from his face as the two women sized each other up. Confusion slowly giving way to suspicion. An awkward silence fell over the trio, broken only when Mandy, ever the gracious hostess, extended her hand to Delilah and introduced herself. Delilah reciprocated, her eyes darting between Mandy and Alton. Noting the familiar way Mandy's hand rested on Alton's arm, the conversation that followed was a masterclass in subtext and veiled accusations. Both women, drawing on their intuition and the subtle signs they had previously dismissed, began to piece together the truth. They spoke of their close friendship with Alton, each anecdote carefully chosen to stake their claim. Alton stood frozen between them, watching helplessly as his carefully compartmentalized words collided. He opened his mouth several times to speak, but no words came out. His silence only served to confirm the growing suspicions of both women. The tension reached a breaking point when Mandy, her voice tight with barely controlled emotion, mentioned a unique bracelet she had given Alton. A bracelet that was at that very moment visible on his wrist. In that moment, the full extent of Alton's deception became clear to both women. Mandy's face crumpled, tears welling in her eyes, while Delilah's expression hardened into one of cold fury. Without another word, both women turned and walked away, leaving Alton standing alone, the weight of his actions finally crashing down upon him. The fallout was immediate and severe. As Mandy and Delilah stormed off in opposite directions, whispers began to circulate through the festival crowd. Neighbors who had witnessed the tense exchange began to speculate, and soon the gossip spread like wildfire through Redwood. Alton, overwhelmed by the sudden exposure of his deceit, fled the festival. He spent the night pacing in his room, alternating between frantically trying to call both women and collapsing in fits of remorse and self-recrimination. The following days were a blur of confrontations and accusations. Mandy showed up at Alton's door the next morning, her eyes red-rimmed from a sleepless night. Her quiet devastation was more painful to Alton than any angry outburst could have been. She spoke of betrayal, of shattered trust, and of the love she thought they had shared. When she left, Alton knew that something irreparable had broken between them. Delilah's reaction was markedly different. She refused to answer Alton's calls or texts, instead sending a scathing email that laid bare all of his lies and manipulations. Her words, sharp as knives, cut through any remaining illusions Alton had about the nobility of his actions. She made it clear that he was never to contact her again. As news of the affair spread, Alton found himself ostracized by the community he had so easily charmed just months before. 30 looks and whispered comments followed him whenever he ventured out. His shifts at the coffee shop became exercises and endurance as he faced the judgment and curiosity of customers who had once adored him. But the worst was yet to come. 1 week after the festival, Alton received a visit from Gregory Correll, Mandy's husband. The normally composed surgeon was trembling with barely contained rage as he confronted Alton about the affair. It was clear that the exposure of Mandy's infidelity had shattered the Corrells' already fragile marriage. As the dust began to settle, Alton was left to face the consequences of his actions. He had not only broken the hearts of 2 women, but had also disrupted the lives of everyone around them. The once peaceful neighborhood of Redwood had been irrevocably changed. Its residents forced to confront the reality that even in their idyllic suburb, passion and deception could lead to devastating consequences. In the weeks following the revelation at the Harvest Festival, the 2 women, once friendly neighbors, now avoided each other at all costs. Their shared humiliation and anger creating an invisible barrier between them. Mandy's life spiraled into chaos. Her husband, Gregory, oscillated between cold fury and desperate attempts to salvage their marriage. Their arguments, once confined to hushed tones behind closed doors, now spilled out into the open. Neighbors pretended not to notice, as shouting matches echoed through the Corrells' usually quiet home. Mandy threw herself into her art with a frenetic energy, producing dark, turbulent pieces that reflected her inner turmoil. She spent hours locked in her studio, emerging only to face the wreckage of her personal life. Her once pristine appearance became disheveled, her eyes hollow with grief and lack of sleep. Delilah, on the other hand, retreated into herself. She worked from home, avoiding the pity and glances and whispered comments of her neighbors. Her brief period of renewed confidence shattered. She found herself slipping back into the insecurities that had plagued her after her divorce. Clients noticed a decline in the quality of her work, and several took their business elsewhere. As the initial shock wore off, the women's pain began to transmute into anger. Not just at Alton, but at each other. They began to see each other as rivals, each blaming the other for the destruction of their relationship with Alton and the upheaval in their lives. The tension between them came to a head one afternoon at the local supermarket. Mandy and Delilah found themselves face to face in the produce section, their shopping carts colliding in a jarring metaphor for their collided lives. What started as terse apologies quickly escalated into a heated exchange of accusations and insults. Delilah, her voice shaking with emotion, accused Mandy of using Alton to escape her loveless marriage. Mandy retaliated by insinuating that Delilah's desperation had made her an easy target for Alton's manipulation. The argument grew louder, drawing the attention of other shoppers until a store manager was forced to intervene. The incident at the supermarket marked a turning point. What had been a private scandal became a public spectacle, dividing the community of Redwood. People began to take sides, some sympathizing with Mandy's marital struggles, others relating to Delilah's vulnerability as a divorcee. Two women found themselves at the center of a maelstrom of gossip and judgment. As the conflict between Mandy and Delilah intensified, Alton became an almost forgotten figure in the drama. He had retreated from public life, rarely leaving his house except to go to work. When he did venture out, he kept his head down, avoiding eye contact with anyone he passed. But the young man's attempt to fade into the background would prove futile. Unbeknownst to him, His actions had set in motion a chain of events that would culminate in a tragedy no one could have foreseen. The simmering tensions between Mandy and Delilah were about to boil over, with devastating consequences for everyone involved. Turning of November 15th dawned cold and grey, a fitting backdrop for the tragedy that was about to unfold. Across the street, Delilah Frost was awake, staring at her computer screen as she tried to focus on a project due later that day. Her work, once a source of pride and fulfillment, now felt hollow. She found herself constantly distracted by thoughts of Alton, of Mandy, of the life she had briefly thought might be possible. Before it all came crashing down, the catalyst for the day's events came in the form of a simple email. Delilah, in a moment of weakness, had decided to reach out to Alton. Her message was brief, a request to meet to find some closure on their relationship. She hit send before she could second guess herself. Unaware of the chain reaction she had just set in motion, Mandy, who had taken to checking Alton's email, his password unchanged from when they were lovers, saw the message pop up. In his inbox, something inside her snapped. The thought of Alton and Delilah rekindling their relationship, of being left behind while they moved on together, was more than she could bear. In a haze of jealousy and pain, Mandy made her way to Gregory's study. She knew he kept a hand gun in his desk drawer, a precaution he'd taken after a series of break-ins in the neighborhood years ago. With shaking hands, she retrieved the weapon, its weight unfamiliar and terrifying, in her grasp. Meanwhile, Delilah had decided to clear her head with a walk. The crisp autumn air beat at her cheeks as she made her way down the street, lost in thought. She was so distracted that she didn't notice Mandy approaching until it was too late. Mandy confronted Delilah on the sidewalk. Her words had a jumble of accusations and grief. Neighbors would later recount hearing raised voices, the sound of an argument escalating rapidly. Delilah, caught off guard by Mandy's sudden appearance and evident distress, tried to calm the situation, her hands raised in a placating gesture. What happened next would be pieced together from eyewitness accounts and forensic evidence. In a heightened emotional state, Mandy produced the gun. Whether she intended to use it or merely to threaten is unclear. Delilah, seeing the weapon, made a move, either to disarm Mandy or to flee. A single shot rang out, shattering the morning quiet of Redwood. Delilah crumpled to the ground, a bloom of red spreading across her chest. Mandy stood frozen, the gun slipping from her nervous fingers to clatter on the sidewalk. For a moment, time seemed to stand still. Then chaos erupted. Neighbors, drawn by the sound of the gunshot, rushed from their homes. Someone called 911, while others attempted to render first aid to the fallen Delilah. Mandy remained rooted to the spot, her face a mask of shock and horror, as the reality of what she had done began to sink in. By the time police and paramedics arrived, it was too late. Delilah Frost was pronounced dead at the scene, her life extinguished in a moment of passion and madness. Mandy offered no resistance as she was led away in handcuffs. Her blank stare and tear-streaked face, a stark contrast to the vibrant, confident woman she had been just months before. As news of the shooting spread, the residents of Redwood were left to grapple with the shocking turn of events. The idyllic facade of their neighborhood had been irreparably shattered, leaving in its wake a community forever changed by tragedy. The police investigation moved swiftly, with multiple witnesses, and Mandy Correll's immediate surrender. There was little mystery surrounding the events of that fateful morning. However, as detectives dug deeper, they uncovered a complex web of relationships and emotions that had led to the tragic outcome. Gregory Correll, Mandy's husband, found himself thrust into an impossible situation. As a prominent member of the community, He was now faced with the public humiliation of his wife's infidelity, coupled with the horror of her actions. He retreated from public life, taking a leave of absence from the hospital where he worked. The investigation also brought to light the extent of Mandy's emotional distress in the weeks leading up to the shooting. Friends and neighbors previously hesitant to get involved now came forward with accounts of her erratic behavior and apparent mental decline. These revelations would later play a crucial role in her legal defense. Twyla Frost's family arrived from out of state, shell-shocked and grieving. As the investigation progressed, attention turned to the weapon used in the shooting. The gun, legally registered to Gregory Correll, had been improperly stored, raising questions about his potential liability in the incident. This development added another complex dimension to an already multifaceted case. The trial of Mandy Correll began 6 months after the shooting. The prosecution painted Mandy as a cold-blooded killer, arguing that her actions were premeditated and born of jealousy. They presented evidence of her declining mental state and the calculated retrieval of the weapon as proof of intent. The defense, however, portrayed Mandy as a victim of circumstance, a woman pushed to the brink by betrayal and emotional turmoil. They brought in expert witnesses to testify about the effect of prolonged stress and emotional trauma on decision-making. Alton Rhodes' testimony was a pivotal moment in the trial. His account of the affairs and the events leading up to the shooting provided crucial context, though his appearance on the stand was clearly painful for all involved. After weeks of testimony and deliberation, the jury reached a verdict. Mandy Correll was found guilty of second-degree murder, a lesser charge than the prosecution had sought. The judge, taking into account the circumstances and Mandy's lack of prior criminal history, sentenced her to 18 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after 12 years. In the years following the trial, the residents of Redwood struggled to move forward. The neighborhood, once known for its tranquility, now carried the weight of tragedy.